Chapter 9. Blaine. You in a hurry tonight, Hollis? Blaine looked up to see Tucker just a few feet away. His hair was still wet from the shower, but he'd already gotten dressed. Yeah, I have a meeting with Kenzi Lanham. His eyes slid from Tucker's as he said Kenzi's name. A meeting or a date? Though he wasn't looking at Tucker, Blaine could hear the teasing tone in his voice. Sort of both, I guess. She's redecorating this cabin I inherited earlier this summer, and I offered to take her to dinner. Actually, he'd asked her to dinner, but really the two were similar, right? Uh-huh. And which does she think it is? Blaine swallowed and lifted his eyes to Tucker. A date, probably. Tucker laughed and shook his head. Blaine Hollis and Kenzi Lanham. I can't decide whether that's a match made in heaven or a train wreck waiting to happen. What do you mean? Blaine shut the locker door and zipped up his bag. Look, I've spent more time with Kenzi than you have. I like the girl, but she's always seemed a little flighty. Sure, she's settled down more now that she knows what she wants to do, but only in her job. I haven't heard of her having a relationship since I met her. And then there's you. The man who's never brought the same woman to an event twice? You two are either going to be perfect together or set a record for who can run away fastest. Though Blaine knew Tucker was right, hearing it didn't sit well with him. You better watch it, Jackson. I can make practice extra hard for you next week. Tucker Jackson held up his hands in surrender. Hey, I'm just stating what I see. Really, though, I hope you guys hit it off. Kenzi is a nice girl, and you both deserve a little happiness. With that, he turned and exited the locker room before Blaine could say anything else. He deserved a little happiness. The words ran through his mind like a broken record as he drove to pick up Kenzi. Was he giving off a vibe that he wasn't happy, or was Tucker just issuing platitudes? And did he deserve happiness after what he'd done? True, it had been years, but that didn't make the guilt any less real, nor did it change the past. The thoughts flew from his mind when Kenzi opened her front door. She was stunning. Her dark hair was pulled to one side and lay in curls down her neck and shoulder. The skirt she was wearing showed off her toned legs, and the smile she flashed at him seemed to brighten even the darkest places in his soul. Wow, was all he could utter. Pink sprouted on her cheeks, and her gaze dropped to the ground for just a moment. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. So, where are we going? There's a really great barbecue place I've been wanting to try out. How does that sound? She flashed a dazzling smile at him as she locked her apartment door behind her. Blaine, I'm a Texas girl. Barbecue is what we do best. He chuckled as he led her to his car, and he wondered just how much of a Texas girl she was. He'd never seen her in cowboy boots, but he could imagine she would make them look good. Are you really a native Texan? He asked when she was settled in the car. Nothing about her, save a tiny hint of an accent, screamed Texan. Through and through, she said as he started the car. I was Miss Southlake in high school. Now that he could believe. Kenzi had the look of a homecoming queen. What about you? She asked. Are you native or an implant? I don't hear much of a drawl when you speak. He chuckled as he pulled to a stop at the red light. Native as well, and I used to have a thick accent, but when I began doing interviews, the coaches told me I needed to get rid of the accent so people could understand me. Took a few lessons and a lot of speaking with a pencil in my mouth, but I finally broke it. Kenzi's forehead wrinkled as she stared at him. A pencil in your mouth? It's supposed to help you enunciate, he said with a laugh, as he remembered his drama teacher making them all read their lines with pencils in their mouths. He hadn't really wanted to take drama, but it satisfied a fine art requirement, and he had actually enjoyed it. Kenzi joined in with his laughter. I guess I'll have to try that sometime. He shot her a quick glance before turning his focus back to the road. Don't you dare. You have a beautiful voice just the way it is. She smiled, and he enjoyed the soft pink that graced her cheeks again as silence fell between them again. The restaurant wasn't overly crowded, for which he was glad. He wanted to spend some time getting to know Kenzi. The hostess led them to a table in the back, and Blaine held out the chair for Kenzi as she sat. Thank you. After he sat, the hostess left them with menus, promising the waitress would be back soon to take their order. So you said I would be your first real client after the center. Do you have any other jobs lined up? The light from above cast a soft glow on her face, which made her eyes seem to sparkle and shimmer, and he was having a hard time making his brain process even simple statements. Her teeth chewed lightly on her bottom lip. I had a few interviews last week, but I haven't heard back from any of them. Her eyes darted to his. I hope that doesn't make you reconsider hiring me. Blaine wondered where this lack of confidence was coming from. From what he'd seen, she was amazing, and he had no doubt he would be pleased with her work. Not at all. I have no doubt that your business will take off, especially after seeing your designs. I'll help in whatever way I can. Thank you. I appreciate that. She paused and took a sip of her water glass, but he could sense that she wanted to say something more. What is it? It's probably none of my business, but I am curious. Curious. Now there was a dangerous word. What exactly was she curious about, and was he willing to answer her question? Normally now would be the time that he would shut down and deflect the question away, but he found himself opening up instead. What do you want to know? I'm an open book. Well, mostly open. He wouldn't discuss his brother, but he doubted she would know about him anyway. She considered him another moment before tilting her head and asking, How is it that you're still single? You have this amazing job and this great personality, but I've never heard of you being in a relationship. Her eyes held his gaze for another moment before slipping to the side. He should have known this question would come up, and while it wasn't an easy one to answer, it was definitely better than discussing his family. He shrugged, his eyes flitting around the room while he tried to come up with as much of the truth as he was willing to share. Well, I guess I just haven't found a woman I wanted to spend a lot of time with. That wasn't a total lie. You know, I could ask the same question of you. A knowing smile crossed her face. His change of subject hadn't gotten past her. Yes, I guess you could. And I suppose my answer would be very similar to yours. I've been told I'm a little picky. Well, I hope you're not so picky that you can't find something you enjoy on the menu. I don't think that will be a problem at all. It was odd how comfortable he was around her, how he could laugh and joke with her. He couldn't remember ever feeling like this around a woman, and it scared him to death. Eating with her was nice. Spending time with her was refreshing. He could see himself falling for her. But what if he couldn't protect her when she needed it? He wasn't sure he could live through the past again, nor could he imagine spending another lonely night at home, knowing he could have a night like this. Kenzi. Kenzi could see the invisible wall Blaine kept up lowering as the night went on. She wasn't sure what he kept the wall up for, but she was certainly enjoying getting to know this side of him. He was funny and caring, and she could feel herself falling for him, even though she kept reminding herself that she couldn't. Her brain knew there were a million reasons she couldn't, but her heart just didn't seem to agree. It was her heart that spoke as she set her glass down. If you have time tomorrow, would you like to come with me to pick appliances? The words flew past her lips before they registered in her brain, and she hoped they didn't dampen the mood. She didn't want him to think she only cared about business, but she did want to see him again. This would be a perfect opportunity. She clamped her lips shut as she waited for him to answer. The need to explain her reasoning thudded in her brain, but she figured it would be safer to hear his answer first. His eyes twinkled as he regarded her. Darn her face and its inability to mask her emotions. What would that entail? His teasing response caught her off guard. She had expected him to make an excuse as to why he couldn't, not flirt with her across the table. Well, I like to save money on appliances because I usually need it for other areas, so I generally buy them at Home Depot. So I guess that would entail meeting me there and helping me decide on which appliances. And is that all it would entail? All? What was he asking? Did he expect to get a massage after it or something? I don't know what you mean. He smiled at her obvious discomfort, and a tiny dimple appeared in his cheek. Was he razzing her? How about this? I'll help you pick out appliances if we can have dinner again afterwards." Dinner again? Kenzi's head was spinning. Blaine, the guy who never saw the same woman twice, wanted to have dinner with her 2 nights in a row? She should say no. Her mind knew that much. This was too weird, too unlike him. What if this was like 5th grade, when Brian Harding asked her out in a note at lunch and sent her little heart thumping in her chest? Brian had been her first crush, and the thought that he, one of the most popular boys, would like her, when she wasn't the thinnest, or the cutest, or the most popular girl, had been more than she could bear. She'd floated through the next few classes until they had social studies together. But when she'd entered that room and told him her answer was yes, he laughed it off and told her it had all been a joke. It hadn't been funny to her, and the next day he was seen flirting with Wendy Wiseman, the thinnest, cutest, most popular girl in the 5th grade. A part of her had died that day, and she never wanted to feel that way again. So what if she said yes, and then Blaine never showed? She knew there was danger here, but that didn't keep her mouth from saying, "Okay, dinner sounds good." "Good. You ready to get out of here?" He stood and held out his hand to her. Had he already paid? How had she missed the check coming? Was this a date then, since he'd paid? Even more importantly, was tomorrow a date? Kenzi prided herself on being in control, but right now she felt like a kid on roller skates for the first time. The only thing she was sure of was that she was enjoying spending time with Blaine, and she didn't want it to end. Placing her hand in his, she let him pull her up. She expected he would drop her hand as soon as she was on her feet, but he didn't. Instead, he gripped her hand tighter as he led her out of the restaurant. "You feel like a walk?" he asked when they exited the restaurant and the cool evening air hit them. It was almost 8 and the sun was setting in the sky, sending brilliant oranges, reds, and pinks across the sky. She'd visited a few other states, but there was nothing like a Texas sunset, and she couldn't imagine seeing it a better way. "Sure." He led the way from the restaurant and down a lighted path. Kenzi's gaze dropped to their entwined hands every few minutes. She still couldn't believe she was on a date with Blaine Hollis. Nor could she believe he was holding her hand. It was too bad Brian Harding couldn't see her now. The silence between them wasn't strained, but Kenzi had so many questions. "When did you start playing football?" "Young. I used to play—" He paused, and his jaw tightened. "With my dad in the yard. Then I began playing for school in the 7th grade, and it just went from there." She wondered what that pause had been about. Did he not have a good relationship with his father? Had it soured for some reason? She realized she knew nothing about his family. Even when he was interviewed, Blaine always shifted the focus away from his family and to the game. She was no detective, but something was definitely going on there. "So, did you always want to play professionally?" Kenzi knew it was a common desire for young boys. Many at the center had listed that as their dream occupation when asked. The vein in his neck bulged and his eyes slid away from her. "Yeah, pretty much." A follow-up question burned in her throat, but before she could ask it, the sound of children's voices came their way. "Kevin, wait up!" "No, you're being a bully, and I don't want to play with you anymore." Blaine tensed beside her, and his hand turned clammy against hers. The 2 boys rounded a corner and hurried past them with barely a second glance, but even after they were gone, Blaine remained rooted to the spot. "Are you okay?" He was silent a moment and then shook his head as if clearing away some memory. "I'm fine. Let's just go." His gruff demeanor had returned, and as he turned around, he dropped her hand as well. Kenzi missed the warmth it had provided, but more than that, she wondered, why had the 2 boys affected him so badly? Had he known them? They had been having such a wonderful time, and then all of a sudden, it was over. She missed the feeling of his hand in hers.